Okay, so I'm going to start by showing you the differences between the pencils in your kit. They're going to be measured by hardness. So the higher the H, the harder the pencil. It's going to stay sharper longer. It's going to give you a finer line, and it's often going to be softer. In each of these examples, I'm going to do soft shading, hard shading, and then just soft lines and hard lines. As it goes on, it'll go from a high H to a low H to an HB, and then it'll ascend up into the higher Bs. So as the B increases, you're going to get a softer lead, and with that you're going to get a fuzzier line. You're going to have to sharpen it more often, but it's going to be laying down more material, so it's going to often be darker, even if you're not putting down that much pressure. These are also going to blend more because you do have more material down. So you can use these different pencils for different parts of a drawing, but you can also use them for different parts of the process. So I usually start with a 2H when I lay down my approximate lines and I'm figuring things out. I'm not going to go in with a B pencil because I want to be able to easily erase and correct. If you guys really get into graphite, I would suggest looking at the woodless graphite pencils. I really like them. They give you a slightly different effect, but you're in no means required to have these for this class. I just thought I would show you so you guys can be exposed to them. Another tool you're not required to have for this class, but I just wanted to show it to you. It is an ebony pencil, and it can really help you get in those really dark values if you're finding that you can't get it with an AB pencil. Here I'm going to show you more the effect of hatching, so just layering material onto the paper, versus blending, where you actually use a blending stump to smooth out the values. With hatching, you're going to get more of the texture of the paper. You're going to have to layer more on your own. With blending, it's going to smooth out the texture of the paper, so it kind of comes down to an aesthetic choice. I know a lot of people who really like showing the individual little strokes of the pencil, or like they emphasize the texture of the paper, and I know some people who have seamless blending. So it really comes down to what aesthetically you like. For this example, I'm doing some pretty basic hatching and blending. If you were wanting to realistically render an object, it's really helpful to cross contour and to contour around the object. So if I was doing a sphere, it would be helpful to really curve around the surface instead of just doing these straight lines. Because even if you don't blend it out all the way, the form is better described with your lines around it instead of just straight and flat. Looking here at the white eraser versus the kneaded eraser, the white's going to have a crisper line, it's going to pick up more material. The kneaded eraser is going to have more of a soft edge, and it's not going to pick up as much material. However, you can mold it into whatever shape you want to get an edge, and you can also hold it like I am now and blot it almost to lighten the value instead of fully erasing. You can also use both of these erasers with the stencil here. It comes with a lot of drawing kits, and it'll help you get a really concentrated erase. I find the white eraser works better with this than the kneaded does, but the kneaded, as I said, you can really like mold to a point or mold to a flat surface to get more of a precise line. You can also note that the kneaded eraser is going to be much kinder to your paper. A white eraser, I would not go over the same area over and over and over again, as it is harder on your paper. So here I'm drawing a still life of some printmaking supplies I have set up in my studio. I'm drawing really lightly so that I can measure and make corrections very easily before I end up doing some really dark finalized lines. You can see here how I'm shaping up the handle of this carving tool more. It was really simplistic, and now I've made it a little more accurate with the bow underneath. I realized my scraping tool, the handle was too short, so I was able to correct that. You can see here I've drawn the brayer far too foreshortened, so I'm going to widen that up a little bit, add some more details, kind of flesh it out a little bit more. And you can see that my angles are off, so I've drawn straight lines all the way through to kind of help me keep the perspective continuous, so it actually lines up and looks like the same object. Here I'm starting to add some darker lines. I've changed pencils. These are going to be more finalized as I figure out the shape. If you notice, I am going in with a darker pencil. I am making a neater, cleaner line, but I'm not pushing down all the way, especially on those darker spots that I'm going to want to be a solid line. I'm going to do that later when I'm absolutely sure that's the line I want. For contour line drawings, you really want to have the lighter lines on the top and the darker on the bottom, like that one I just drew on the bottom of the carving tool. It gives it more weight, so your object looks a little bit more 3D even without shading. The darker lines are a combination of me pushing harder as well as using a more soft pencil, so a higher B. I'm again going to double check these lines to make sure that they're receding, make sure they're all parallel and matching up as they should, and I'll be able to erase that later because I've done it with a lighter pencil. Now I'm going in, cleaning up with the eraser, and I'm just going to clean up the whole drawing because I have way too many lines. They helped me in the beginning, but we're done with them, so we really want it to be very simple but very accurate. In erasing, I've sometimes erased too much. That's fine because I've left the impression of the line so I can very easily trace it and it'll look really clean. With any still life drawing or any drawing from observation, really any work of art, it's really important to back up and get, quote, fresh eyes on your work. As I'm looking at it now, I didn't really notice earlier that the handle on the brayer, the piece on the bottom, it's not matching up. The right side of it is lower than the left side. So if I had taken a step back, looked at my drawing, I really could have seen that earlier and improved it. I'm also looking and the angle of the curvature as the brayer meets that T, that's a little bit inaccurate. It's a little too foreshortened on this front side. So again, if I had taken the time to step back and look at it, I could have fixed that before I laid down darker lines. I'm now going to go in and draw the shadow. Notice I'm using really thin lines. I'm not putting a lot of pressure. It's kind of the suggestion of a shape because a shadow is not a real shape. It does not need to look heavy. I'm using a 2H pencil. Again, I'm not pushing down hard. It's a very thin line. You notice that I've switched to a mechanical pencil. I think this can be useful in a contour line drawing. However, I think you should save it for the end because it really does lay down kind of a dark line. It can be really precise though when you're doing your final lines. So I would suggest using it, but only at the very end of your drawing. Here I'm doing a really quick drawing of a sphere. Notice how, again, I've got a very light pencil. I think this is a 2H. I'm not sure of my lines. I'm trying to figure out where the edges of the circle should be. I'm going to draw out my shadow very lightly. It's all just helping me figure out the shape because I'm not sure yet. Like my shadow is tilted right now. So I'm going to go back in and fix that and tidy it up. If you go in too dark initially, it's going to be really hard to erase, and plus you might be more wed to those lines when you shouldn't be. So right now I'm really figuring it out still. I'm not committed to any of those lines, and it'll help me get a more accurate form later. Here I'm starting to layer in some contour lines, some cross contours, really understanding the form. I'm not really shading. I'm not doing anything other than layering in lines for my own understanding. Here I've picked up another pencil. I think this is a 2B. You can see the lines are much darker. In doing so, I'm still understanding the form, but I'm starting to layer in this darker value. Here I'm tilting the pencil more on the side, so I'm getting more of a shade rather than a line, and that'll help me later when I use the blending stump. Here I've picked up my third pencil. It's a 6B. I'm still following the contour of the sphere, but I'm more focused on putting down material and laying in value. Still using my 6B, I'm pushing a little harder to really push that shadow underneath the sphere. I'm layering in value. The shadow is going to be on a flat surface, so I'm just making sure my lines reflect that. Here is more effective to use the straight hatching rather than following the contour because the contour of the ground is straight. Here I picked up the blending stump and I'm starting to blend out those values. You can see the texture of the paper and the lines where I've really followed the contour. They're kind of starting to fade into the back, and the blending stump is actually making lines of its own. So again, I'm still following the contour because I don't want flat lines on a spherical object. I'm going to blend a little on the shadow. However, there's a lot more material here of a lot softer of a pencil. So I need to be aware that my blending stump now has this darker graphite on it. So when I go back in, I'm going to go back on the darker part of the shadow. I'm going to go back in with my kneaded eraser, kind of blotting, almost drawing lines, contouring back in so that I can blend the graphite onto this newly white area, cleaning up my edges. Because you shouldn't outline the borders of your shape. You should really just let the values stop. Because when you look at a sphere in real life, there's not going to be a black outline. So that's again why you want to start with a lighter pencil. I'm adding more of the graphite so that I can blend it out, but also I want this shadow. Notice how I'm not going all the way to the bottom because you're going to have reflected light that's going to come up on the very back surface of your object. And that really makes it round because otherwise it would look more flat. It's not going to be totally white on top and totally dark on the bottom. You're going to have a little bit of a shadow on the top where I'm drawing right now, and then you're going to have a little bit of reflected light on the very bottom. So your darkest shadow is not actually going to be on the bottom. I'm going back in to make sure I'm really getting that highlight because it kind of got dull the more I worked on it. I'm blotting it to raise the values around it and tightening my edges again. I erased too much, not a big problem. Just go back in and blend the edge of that circle back out. Kind of messed up my shadow, so I'm going in and fixing that. Now I'm going to come in with my white eraser. Like I said, it's harsher on your paper, so I don't really want to use it the whole time, but it is really good for cleaning up. It's going to give me more of a crisp line on the outside of that sphere. Or if I really wanted to pop that highlight, the white eraser would work really well. And as you're developing this, you might notice like some things are falling flat. So here I didn't think I punched the shadow enough, so I'm going in and adding more because I really want it to seem as round as possible. And right now it looks, you can tell where I drew. So I want to blend it out, so I smooth out and soften all those values so it looks more smooth. As I'm working in this darker area, I can kind of bring that graphite up so it's like a smooth transition. I'm bringing this darker bit that's still on the blending stump. I'm just blending it upward into this lighter area. Again, pumping out my highlight, softening those edges because it looked a little too dark, softening all the value shifts. So it's just a lot of layering until you feel like you've captured what the form looks like. Here I'm using the edge of the eraser to really get underneath the sphere between the shadow, but this is a new eraser so I can do that. It has a corner. Ideally I would probably use the erasing stencil with an older eraser.